Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, as we are now going to give some updates on some of the recent transactions in the NFL, starting with the news that broke this morning that division rivals in the Philadelphia Eagles and Washington Commanders have agreed to a trade that is sending Jahan Dotson, the Commanders' first-round selection in 2022, to the Eagles, along with a fifth-round pick in exchange for a third-round pick and 2 seventh-rounders. So we had heard over the past few weeks that Jahan Dotson was struggling in training camp, specifically with drops. He is somebody who at one point seemed like he was going to be an established number 2 behind Terry McLaurin, but obviously Dan Quinn himself just a couple weeks ago said that the Commanders were actively seeking a more reliable wide receiver 2, listed some other names ahead of Dotson as guys that could end up taking on that role, and obviously things did not get better from that point, and the Commanders made the move to send him to Philadelphia, which is very interesting to me considering the fact that Dotson, being selected in 2022, still has 2 years left on his contract, and then an additional team option for a 5th year should they decide to pick that up. This is an Eagles team that already just this past offseason re-upped Devontae Smith and AJ Brown on new contracts, and now they are adding another first-round talent in Jahan Dotson into the room. Now, again, obviously, Dotson, there's a reason he's being moved. He, after flashing in his rookie season, he wasn't able to build on that. Averaged just 30.5 receiving yards per game last season, 10.6 yards per reception, which is still a solid mark, but that was down significantly from 14.9 in 2022. Wasn't getting in the end zone at the same rate that he was in his rookie season. So again, there's a reason why Dotson is being moved. It's not because immediately the idea, at least, is that the Eagles fleeced the Commanders. That's very rarely the case that a team just openly, trades a former first-round pick, a recent first-round pick nonetheless, for no reason whatsoever. So Commanders needed to understand we have the NFL Cut Day taking place next Tuesday, I believe it is, on August 27th. I could have that date wrong, but they know that they're going to have to start cutting down on their roster, and Dotson just, I suppose, didn't really seem like he had a place on the team for the upcoming season and additionally in the long term. So they end up cashing out for what's a fine return. 3rd round pick and 2 7th-rounders. I mean, it's obviously an upgrade in terms of draft capital, turning essentially the 5th into a 3rd rounder and getting an extra 7th rounder in return. So a fine deal for the Commanders, but at the same time, this could end up breaking poorly for them, especially making the trade within the own division. I wasn't surprised that they decided to move him, but the Eagles was definitely a little bit of a surprise landing spot, and I think that this is a very nice risk taken for the Eagles, where, again, it's not like you're giving up crazy draft capital, not even not a round 1 pick, obviously, not even a round 2 pick, so there's some value in the 3rd, but the Eagles, they're just fixated right now on trying to make it back to the Super Bowl. And Dotson is somebody who additionally has roster control for another couple years. Now, they already have a ton of money wrapped up into their receivers with AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, and really their skill position players in general as well, with Jalen Hurts on a new deal, just signed Saquon Barkley in the offseason. So that's an expensive offense building up there, but so, the odds that Dotson ends up getting a long-term deal in Philadelphia feels a little bit unlikely to me. But even if it's just for 2 years, adding another deep field threat could be very interesting. I'm definitely not saying that Jahan Dotson changes the way that teams are going to game plan for the Eagles, but you already have Devontae Smith, who can stretch the field out, can be that deep threat. So with a couple guys who can, get over the top, it is going to, I would like to think, initial reaction here, I'd like to think that opposing defenses are going to be very cautious with Devontae Smith and Jahan Dotson on the field to not let anything get behind them. But that being said, the Eagles' the Eagles' run game and underneath game in the passing game with AJ Brown and Dallas Goedert should also be very solid, where you have, like I mentioned, Brown and Goddard, who can get some damage done in the intermediate game. You have Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley combining for a rush attack. The offensive line without Jason Kelce is not going to be quite as good, but should still be one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. And I think that Dotson becomes a little bit of an interesting wrinkle here, where, again, just adds at least that extra threat of being a deep guy for them. Again, we'll see whether or not he is able to pick himself back up after, I don't know if you'd consider it a flame out in Washington, but it definitely wasn't a good start to his career. So he's hoping to land on his feet somewhere. It seems to be Philadelphia for now. And again, really like the move for the Eagles. Very quickly here on the Commanders as well. We've already talked about it a couple times throughout these past few weeks since we heard that Dotson was struggling and that the Commanders were in search of a wide receiver too. Think that the De'Ami Brown rumors that he has been impressing probably played some factor into this. I thought that De'Ami Brown has looked pretty good in his first couple preseason games as well. Somebody that was once a day 2 pick not that long ago. See what he could turn into. Olamide Zaccheaus, as well as the name that Dan Quinn has mentioned that has been standing out in practice for them. We talked about this the other day. Again, they have some names in that wide receiver room, also drafting Luke McCaffrey, Christian McCaffrey's brother, in the draft this past year as well. So there's definitely question marks around the depth in terms of who is definitively going to be the answer, who is going to step up into the role that Dotson was supposed to take on. But even if they don't get that necessarily, I think they'll have passable options. I don't hate their tight end room either. Zach Ertz, fine, at this point, older. But Ben Sinnott is a name that I'm definitely keeping an eye on this year. I don't believe that the Commanders are going to be a great team this year. I have them as one of the worst teams in the NFL. But, all of that could change as well if Jaden Daniels obviously emerges onto the scene. But loses a wide receiver, which definitely is not a great start to Daniels' tenure in Washington. But if it wasn't going to work, so be it. You get a third-round pick in the coming years that you can use to draft somebody who can actually help Jaden Daniels in, I believe that pick is in the 2025 draft. But very quickly, we will hit on the other news that the Atlanta Falcons are signing cornerback AJ Terrell to a new contract, 4 years, $81 million with $65.8 million guaranteed. AJ Terrell, who I believe he was a first-round pick, I can double check on that as well, but AJ Terrell, he was a first round pick, 16th overall in the 2020 draft, and 2020 and 2021 were where he was, flashing that potential, especially in 21 becoming an all-pro second team caliber player. So we know that the talent is there. Past 2 seasons have been a little bit disappointing for him. Now sort of started to go back up in the right direction with his 2023 campaign, and the Falcons are going to need him this upcoming year considering where they're at as a franchise at this point, seemingly trying to, push themselves into contention in what is a pretty open NFC North, or NFC in general is what I meant to say. And I think that their defense is fine. Like I mentioned, Raheem Morris being hired as the head coach, I have confidence in him, especially coming off of a year last season where he took sort of a younger LA Rams defense and helped them to overachieve. This Falcons defense in their own right, you can argue, overachieved last year. So they bring in Raheem Morris to run the team as a whole, but definitely help on that defensive side of the ball. They just brought in a couple of veterans last week in Matthew Judon and Justin Simmons to try and help bring some more experience to what is a younger defense. And they locked down AJ Terrell. And Terrell is cornerback 1. I don't know how much depth there really is at that cornerback position. Mike Hughes currently projected to be on the opposite side of Terrell. You bring in a former day 2 pick in Kevin King in free agency. I think this is his upcoming first year with Atlanta, but it's not all that great of a group necessarily. So Terrell, they would love to see him emerge back into an all-pro caliber player. Now, he's definitely not alone by there. I was talking about the cornerbacks. Don't want to, forget about Jesse Bates at safety. I feel like I've been pretty vocal about my support for Jesse Bates at that safety position, that he is possibly the best safety in the league. Him and Kyle Hamilton are two of my favorites at the position. But I think that ultimately, this Falcons team, they are hoping to be playing in big games. And AJ Terrell is going to be asked to take on some big responsibilities in big moments if that's where the Falcons reach. And he should be capable of doing so. But again, it's a lot of money to obviously cough up there. And I was a little bit surprised looking at this deal. But at the same time, I don't have any problem with it, and we'll just sort of have to wait and see. Falcons definitely seem to be in on what they're building up right now, and only time will tell whether or not things actually play out the way that they are anticipating. But let me know what your thoughts are on not just the Terrell deal, but the Dotson deal as well. But we are now going to be taking our next break here, and when we come back on the other side, we're going to be continuing with our NFC South teams previews, and today we have the New Orleans Saints, so we will be diving into that. But first, a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.